I have made every single mistake you can possibly make as an investor. And in this video, I hope you can have a laugh at my expense and hopefully learn from my mistakes and from some of the lessons as we move through.
Finally, here we go. We get to have a bit of a laugh at my big brother Ben for the mistakes that he's made over the last 13 years as a property investor. Hopefully I can avoid making these mistakes because you've already done it for us. But let's start with one of the funniest mistakes that you've made with the Central Coast property that you bought in San Remo.
Yeah, so this was the second investment I ever bought. I remember being at work. I think you were in the office that day. And
Yep.
I get a call from the property manager. Hey, Ben, your property's on fire. I'm like, what? I'll give you a call back. But I'm freaking out. I ran straight to my computer, obviously, and made sure that I had insurance in place, which I did. So obviously I tried to call her back a bunch of times in that couple of hours, didn't hear much from her. Found out the next day that my tenants had burnt down my granny flat. Now there's a whole story in that, which we might do for fun on another video at some point. But the mistake that I made there was not managing my manager. So I sort of thought at that time it was my second property. I was very green. If I got a good property manager in place, then I don't have to think about it. But over time, my property was in worse and worse shape. Now, the lesson that I learned out of that was obviously to manage my manager, to read my inspection reports when they come through each quarter, as well as always making sure I've got adequate insurance in place.
That is an absolute horror story, and I think that would deter most people, 99% of people, away from property investing. But you continued the path. That was only your second property, and then we've made some more mistakes in the future. So let's talk about your Sunshine Coast property, the one that you built in Batinia. What were the mistakes there? Because when you bought it, I thought it was the be-all and end-all.
You know, me too. That was my dream home at that time. But unfortunately, in my life at that time, I was just managing emotions, young kids, a young business, many property projects as well around that. And I think it all just got the best of me and I got a little bit spooked. This was during that period, I think, of 2018, 19, where APRA stepped in really hard, made it very difficult for investors to get money. And because of my headspace and my anxieties at that time, I really thought the world was coming to an end and I had to offload the assets. So I sold at a really bad time. That was the mistake that I learned. I sold the property in the 800,000. And had I have kept that property for another year, I could have sold it for about 1.2 mil. Or held it today, it'd probably be worth 1.4, 1.5. So big lesson there around not letting my emotions and my nerve get the better of me. And these days to have safety checks, to take time to make decisions and to understand longer term cycles so that I'm not buying and selling at the wrong periods of history.
I love the terminology that you use with yourself there as well, like mistakes I've learned. Because like we all make mistakes, right? But as long as you learn from them and you don't make them again in the future, it should be all good. So, let's scale it way back to your first ever investment property, the unit that you bought with a couple of your mates in Miranda, which once again at the time we thought was a kick-ass investment, but obviously, things change.
Things definitely changed on that property. So I suppose the mistake that I made without knowing it was I bought with a couple of my best mates. Now that wasn't the mistake. Actually, it was really fun buying with the boys. I remember the day we bought it. We went down to Bondi and sunk like a case of beers and then partied that night and had an absolute ball. But the mistake that I made was not understanding how banks look at purchasing with friends or people that you're not going to continue to buy with in the future. So what I realized is we bought the property for 360. We owed about 300K debt on it. And the bank saw me and my two best friends fully liable for 100% of that debt each. But then they divided the rent by 4. So 25% to them and 25% to the three of us. And so when I went for future properties, I was carrying this massive debt with this really low rent return. So the mistake that I made was not asking the right questions to my broker or working with a broker that wasn't explaining the way that this would affect me in the future. But the lesson that I learned personally was a big one early, and that is if you can buy property on your own or with your lifelong partner, then that is by far the best way to do it.
It's just so crucial to have a good team of advisors that have got your back and that are willing to support you through that journey. And it's not just about each transaction. You don't want a transactional partner. You want a long-term relationship with your team of advisors that understand your goals in life and what you want to do. And if you had that in the beginning, you maybe wouldn't have made that mistake. But a lesson learned, and I think an important one, because a lot of people do come to us wanting to buy in a joint venture with family or friends. And, this is obviously a lesson for those folks as well. But let's go into the fourth mistake that we made. This was one of your properties up here in Brisbane. So tell us a little bit more about that one.
Yeah, so this was a subdivision that I did on the northern beaches of Brisbane in a suburb called Clontarf. The subdivision ended up working out really well. It was a 1,200 square metre vacant block. I cut it in two, and then I went to build on one side and sold off the other piece of land. Now, the mistake that I made this time was not doing my due diligence and double checking all of the work that the solicitor and the builder were doing. Now, what happened at this point was the subdivision's complete. I've sold one of the pieces of land and I'm about to start, literally the builder's gone to site to start the project the next week. This project had been going on for more than 12 months, and effectively on the day that the builder went out for the first time, the person that I'd sold it to, who was flying up from Melbourne, was at the site at that exact moment. The builder was measuring up and scraping the site that I thought was mine, and then this person's like, "You're about to start building on my lot." So the solicitor had mixed up the lots, and she had given the builder the wrong lot number, and he was about to start building a $400,000 home on someone else's piece of land that I didn't even own. So if this hadn't have just happened in that moment and they were there on site at the exact same time, they could have potentially fetched everything that I'd built, or I would have had to knock it over from scratch and go to the other side again.
Wow, the universe is working in your favour that day. Like, how serendipitous it all happened with the builder on site when they rocked up, because that was the first time that they came to look at the block of land as well, because they bought it sight unseen. So scary situation for everybody there. Just a reminder to do your due diligence, dot the I's, cross the T's, and make sure that you read through those documents. Now, over a decade into the journey, you've been a part of buying hundreds of millions of dollars worth of real estate. Now, obviously gone through private treaties, auctions, off-market, pre-market, all of these different things. What are some of the mistakes or lessons that have been learned when negotiating?
Yeah, so I remember sitting at an auction that I was looking at. There's a road called Oceanic Drive in Warana on the Sunshine Coast, and it's kind of like the road that runs along the beach. At the time, I was looking to buy a home and knock it over and rebuild it for my family. And so I'm at this auction. It's in a time in the market where things had gone really ballistic, and then it was really scary, similar to like 2022 in different parts, very similar to 2020. And I'm sitting at the auction and there's this old grey-haired investor sitting next to me, and the property's going for like a ridiculously good price. There was me and one other guy bidding. And I think the place ended up selling for like $565,000.
Oh no, if anybody knows Oceanic Drive, that is like a steal. That is a distant memory of the past.
Yeah, so I'm sitting next to this guy and he's like, "I just don't think it's worth it. I think Hobart's a better place to buy at the moment," because he was buying these $300,000 homes that are now worth $450K. And I'm sitting next to him and he's like, "I just don't think you should spend any more than that. I think that's overpriced in the current market." Now that home knocked down and rebuilt would be worth, what, 2 to 2.5 if you built the right home on it?
At least.
So listening to somebody who has no fucking idea what they're talking about, which I've done way too many times, has probably I've got a bag of these stories, to be honest with you, and every investor will. But just really listening to your gut and following the market and the data better. Like, had I have just trusted my instinct because I knew that it was a good price, things could be very, very different financially now.
Now, for so many people, they get stuck after purchasing a couple of investment properties because the banks just won't lend them any more money. So what are some of the mistakes that you've made when it comes to securing finance from the banks to be able to purchase more investment property?
Yeah, so I distinctly remember getting to my third property and then my income dropped, my wife had a baby, and we were sort of in that position where we were really stuck. Now, at the time, it was still after the GFC and they were giving money away a lot easier than they are now. I remember going and sitting with the lady at CBA Bank for months and months and months, and she's like, "I just can't make it work." Now, what I didn't realise is that at the time, CBA had a rule that if you were under 30 years of age and had more than $1 million worth of debt in total, that would be their cap. That said, like I was young, I was super impressionable and excited, and I found this absolute cracking beachside property for like $330,000, literally in the same road as Lisa's parents.
Yep.
And I went to it, I got the property, and then went to her and she said, no, unfortunately, you can't finance it. About 2 weeks later, I was introduced to a mortgage broker. I had to crash that contract under finance, which I could do in Queensland because my solicitor had put the right terms in there for me. But I crashed the contract, bumped into this broker, he's like, let me look at your position. Oh, you can actually borrow 600K, just not with CBA. Now that property was the same thing. It's gone from $340,000 with a brand new property on it now to what, 1.6, 1.5. So again, like you're only as strong as the weakest link in the team of advisors that you have, which is why Simon and I surround ourselves with such incredible people now.
You know, the commonalities through this is really telling me like how important that team of advisors is. It is just so important to surround yourself with the best in the business that are going to guide you, support you, and motivate you to get the results that you want. Which sort of leads to this next mistake, which is probably the biggest mistake that you've made in your investment career, trusting the wrong team of advisors.
Yeah, so years and years and years ago, I got a really, really hot tip on a really cheap piece of land in a suburb called Kyogle, which is kind of like inland from Ballina and Byron Bay.
Epic spot nowadays.
Absolutely epic spot now. I probably would have killed it there. But basically, I got this hot tip that I could buy this piece of land, build through this builder who had given me the hot tip, and I could easily make $100,000 cash if I sold it, and he was doing the same thing. So I went out there, I bought the piece of land, and then as soon as construction was due to start, I was like, I better have a proper look into this. Like I really trusted this dude at the time. And I realized like immediately that only 6% of the people living in that suburb could actually afford to buy my home. So now I play to like the averages in the market versus the higher percentages. And I also found out that he wasn't doing the project either, that he was just making money from my build.
Oh.
And so I went through this like 9-month building process, sold the property. I think at that year I was earning $80,000 as my base salary. So about 65 grand after tax. And I think I lost like 35 or 45,000 bucks. So it was like a huge lesson for me. The lesson was, I suppose, start really taking personal responsibility for this and getting into the details. So this was about the time that I started to do suburb research, set up checklists, really look on CoreLogic and subscribing to that, really looking on realestate.com and making decisions based on data versus like instinct or hearsay, because at that point in my investment journey, I was still very much like, let's get rich quick. I want to be financially free by the time I'm like 30 something. And I was chasing easy money and not doing the work that it requires to make great decisions.
You know, when you think about that deal, it just is the complete opposite to the fundamentals that we now talk about after you making those mistakes and learning from those lessons. You know, regional market, you know, low socioeconomic demographics, not close to any big major metro market, new suburb, you know, huge premium that you're going to have to pay so the developer can make some money, so that the guy that you were talking to can make some money, the builder can make some money, small piece of land. So, you know, it's just trusting your gut and doing the research, understanding the fundamentals. Now, we've done so many videos in the past on those fundamentals, which markets perform best, which assets perform best, how to identify suburbs and properties. And, you know, that's been a proven strategy for so many investors over the years. But the video is obviously 8 mistakes that you've made. So what is the last and final big mistake that you feel as though you've made?
The last major mistake was unsuccessfully, like many people out there at the moment, predicting the last 5 crashes and none of them came. And so many armchair investors and armchair analysts are looking at markets, and it's so funny like to say that, because a dude that we had a strategy session with and that signed up a few weeks ago said, I have now successfully mispredicted the last 3 crashes in the last 10 years. He's like, I clearly have no idea what I'm fucking talking about, and I don't want to miss this next opportunity of buying 15% below market value. I was laughing so hard because I reckon I've done it more than that.
Yeah.
And so the last time I most successfully mispredicted a crash was probably about 2019, 2018. At that time, I was really spooked out. It's when I sold that property on the Sunshine Coast and a whole bunch of others because I was so fearful. And then the market absolutely skyrocketed off that point. So what I did at that, or my lesson here is, I suppose, I went and found people that had looked at history for hundreds of years. I went and read Phil Anderson's book, The Secret Life of Real Estate and Banking. Went and read Fred Harrison's book, The Power in the Land, which looks at 350 years of booms and busts in the UK. And I started to recognize that the media has a very, very strong interest in a boom or a bust because it sells advertising space. But most of those people aren't analysts with years of experience that have gone and looked at history. So these days, I'm much calmer. Like, meditation has helped with that, training has helped with that, experience has helped with that. But most importantly, there's like hundreds of rules that you and I now have that we used to buy for our clients and ourselves to not get caught up in what's going on at the moment. And I suppose it's probably pretty timely because I believe we've already come off the bottom. I might have this wrong, but CBA, SQM, CoreLogic, Phil Anderson all have a very similar view, as does Simon Priestley. That is just not being communicated at the moment. And we'll see over the next couple of years as we trend out of like a very, very hard 3 or 4 years as investors globally, whether that's stocks, commodities, crypto, property, whatever, into a time that, historically speaking, is seriously insane. I don't even know how to say it without swearing.
Yeah, seriously, it is expected to be a big growth year, some boom years coming ahead, but only time is going to tell. Like, at the end of the day, we don't know what's coming next. So all you got to do is develop your belief system, develop your strategy, figure out what it is that you want to achieve in life and go out there and get it. And at the end of the day, we're all going to make these mistakes. I've made minor mistakes on my journey as well, which we'll do a video on in the future. But as long as you learn from these lessons and continue on the path towards achieving your goals in the future, because your life is a hell of a lot better through property investing, through overcoming these challenges and mistakes and sticking to the plan and sticking to the path. So I hope you've all been able to have a bit of a laugh. Like, I think we're going to have to mute my microphone a little bit throughout this video because I was just pissing myself at some of the funny mistakes that Ben's made. So please share this video with somebody who you think will get a bit of value out of it. If you haven't already done so, guys, please subscribe to our YouTube channel, give this video a thumbs up, and leave some ha-ha comments below. Woo! That's a wrap.
That's a wrap.
Have a cool, bro. Yeah. Oh, sweaty. So sweaty. Oh, that's good. Look at that. So nice, eh? Oh.